then I'll also, I will also put this in the chat so that you can have access, viewing access to this document. So let me see, I have to move some things around here. Give me 1 second. Okay, I shared the document with you in the chat, and it is also on my screen. So the way that I got the title for this workshop, Singing of Dark Times, is by the poem Motto by Bertolt Brecht, who is a German writer, and most of you probably have heard this poem, and it goes like this. In the dark times, will there also be singing? Yes, there will be singing about the dark times. And so in thinking about what we could use now as writers, living in a world that I think for a while has felt like it was falling apart at the seams, is to be able to provide space to write about that. So we're going to go poem by poem. And the first poem we're going to read is called Wishes for My Sons. So I'm going to start by reading that to you, and then I'll go over the prompt. I'm going to give 10 minutes for writing, and I realize that that's not a lot of time. It's not necessarily time meant for you to write a complete draft of a poem, but just to get started. Although I have met people who can write entire poems in 10 minutes. I am not one of them. But if you can do that, that is amazing. We will have a few minutes at the end of each writing session to share a favorite line that you wrote during the time that we wrote together. So here is Wishes for Sons by Lucille Clifton. I wish them cramps. I wish them a strange town and the last tampon. I wish them no 7-Eleven. I wish them 1 week early and wearing a white skirt. I wish them 1 week late. Later, I wish them hot flashes and clots like you wouldn't believe. Let the flashes come when they meet someone special. Let the clots come when they want to. Let them think they have accepted arrogance in the universe, then bring them to gynecologists not unlike themselves. So here is the prompt. I just love that poem. Lucille Clifton had a way of putting things so succinctly and so beautifully and powerfully. The prompt is, consider a person or group of people who you wish could experience something difficult that you have experienced. Loss, racism, sexism, loss of reproductive rights, etc. Could be land. Write a poem after Wishes for My Sons by Lucille Clifton, expressing what you wish they understood about your experience. You may shift, if you prefer, to the epistolary form, letter form, or stick to the style and form of Wishes. What I really love about this poem is how direct she is. I love short poems that provide a powerful punch and really drive their point across. So right now it is 4:44. At 4:54, we will come back together. And you can feel free to open that document and have it open on your screen. Okay, I always feel terrible interrupting people when they're writing. Like I can't stand hitting that unmute button. But just take a few seconds to kind of finish up where you are. And when I hope that you'll go back to your work. But when you're ready, you can, if you would like to, please go ahead and share a favorite line that you wrote in these 10 minutes that you had. And you can drop that into the chat and I'll be reading as you put your lines in. Don't be shy. There is no shyness in poetry. Yay, Brianna, thank you. I wish them U-Hauls instead of borrowed pickup trucks. Okay, so I'm going to read as much as I can, but when it flashes, sometimes I miss. I wish you the strength to crawl back from the abyss. I wish for him a thorn in his tongue, so every time he speaks, it bleeds. Wishes for white men in America. I wish them loss of self. I wish them a preemie's dependence. I wish them lipstick and leers. Love that. I wish you could have been grabbed by sudden panic and fear. Yeah, lipstick and leers. I always forget to use alliteration. Does that happen to anyone else? Like you just forget about a literary device that's like so amazing. Okay. If everyone who would like to share has shared, let's move on to the next poem. And I don't want to be sharing my email. That is not what I wanted to do. Okay. The next poem is What Seems Like Joy by Kaveh Akbar. Kaveh is one of my favorite poets. And this poem is just incredible. So this is What Seems Like Joy. How much history is enough history before we can agree to flee our daycares, to wash everything away and start over, leaving laptops to be lost in the wet along with house cats and Christ's own mother. Even a lobster climbs away from its shell a few times a life. But every time I open my eyes, I find I am still inside myself. Each epiphany dull and familiar. Oh, now I am barefoot. Oh, now I am lighting the wrong end of a cigarette. I just want to be shaken new like a flag, whipping away its dust. Want to pull out each of my teeth and replace them with jewels. I'm told what seems like joy is often joy, that the soul lives in the throat, plinking like a copper bell. I've been so young for so many years, it's all starting to jumble together. Joy, jeweling, copper, it's plink, a throat. Sometimes I feel beautiful and near dying, like a feather on an arrow shot through a neck. Other times I feel tasked only with my own soreness, like a scab on the roof of a mouth. My father believed in gardens, delighting at burying each thing in its potential for growth. Some years the soil was so hard the water seeped down slower than the green seeped up. Still, he'd say, if you're not happy in your own yard, you won't be happy anywhere. I've never had a yard, but I've had apartments where water pipes burst above my head, where I've scrubbed a lover's blood from the kitchen tile. Such cleaning takes so much time, you expect there to be confetti at the end. What we'll need in the next life: toothpaste, party hats, and animal bones. Every day, people charge out of this world squealing, goodbye, human behavior. So long, acres of germless chrome. It seems gaudy for them to be so cavalier with their bliss, while I'm still here, lurching into my labor, hanging by my hair from the roof of a chapel, churchlight thickening around me, or wandering into the woods to pull apart eggshells, emptying them in the dirt, then sewing them back together to dry in the sun. Something I love about this poem, and what I love about the way that Akbar writes, is he's in recovery, and one of his books was entirely about the process of entering recovery, the descent into alcoholism and the rise into recovery. And I love the way that he is able to write about becoming renewed, falling apart and becoming renewed in all of the versions of ourselves that will be in one lifetime. So one of my favorite lines from this poem is, even a lobster climbs away from its shell a few times a life. I chose this poem also because of the question, how much history is enough history before we can agree to flee our daycares, to wash everything away and start over? I feel like we've come to this place where, being in the pandemic, and not that the pandemic is over, but we're in this transitional period, I feel like, as a country and as a world and just as human beings. So the prompt that I put together for this poem is, in what seems like joy, Akbar writes of his despair over the state of the world. His poem opens with a question: how much history is enough history before we agree to wash everything away and start over? Write a poem that imagines a new world, one that we must reach through our own versions of enough. So you could write a poem about your own personal apocalypse. You could write a poem, literally about imagining a new world and what it would take to get there. It is 5:02. At 5:12, we will come back together and share a favorite line. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Just kind of start finishing up whatever you're working on, and feel free to drop a favorite line or even part of a line into the chat. Dying early and often cleanses or mires, the abrupt car wreck or grueling surgery or chemo, each and all display us to us so we can choose our self-video. I've never loved my body, but I've used it for pleasure, flung it around like a ruffian. Today's world is feathery, fine. All these imaginings, so distant this morning, so real to me now, laying in the street after falling down for the very first time. As one world shrinks and swirls, you move to the next and the next without judgment. Every body of water has become a patchwork of past hurt sewn together to be felt together. Hem the edges, hum invisible vibrations. We are startled to hear of the loss of an acre of forest after so many verdant decades. Sometimes I listen to the last voicemail you left me, pretend I can call you right back. The babies warm and milk sweet, nuzzling their gossamer heads into my breast. Do I want these things? I am not seeing the grit, the earned wisdom, the grace, the self-acceptance, imagining the way a divinity might see her child, but here I am at the keyboard, feeling my happy bones all sag and tilt. We brought them safely across the bridge and fell the fuck apart into a shaking heap of nerve and bone, our voices only white noise and echo. These are beautiful, guys. Okay, anybody else before we move on? I hope I've given you some good starts for poems here. Okay, I'm going to share two poems with you, and I have to give a little bit of background on them. So the first poem is called Fairy Accident by E.J. Coe. And the second poem is one that I wrote, and it's called Survivor is Most Startled of All. And I actually wrote the poem after Fairy Accident. So E.J. Coe is a Korean poet and memoirist, and she actually did a lot of the translations on the book to series version of Pachinko. She's a very talented writer and translator. And this poem she wrote about a ferry accident, I don't know if all of you remember it, but it took place in Korea. It was a very tragic ferry accident where many people died. And I lost my aunt in the Sampong department store collapse in South Korea many years ago. So let me share the poem Ferry Accident with you. And then I'll share my poem, which was written after this poem. South Korean ferry accident. 276 dead, 232 students, 28 missing, underwater, 1 rescued, found dead, suicide. Search operation is still ongoing. Footage is released to the public. The captain abandoning the ferry in his underwear, barefoot, he jumps into another man's arms. On screen, his face is purple. He knew the ferry was 300 times over capacity, they say. He knew the lifeboats were broken. The cargo was tipping. After the footage, the ferry owner's son disappears. The captain is charged with murder. A senior official of the inspection company, Sea Trust, is arrested. I once took the same ferry route between Incheon and Jeju Island. The decks were green. The students heard over the speakers, "Do not move from your present location and stay where you are." My parents are crying in the other room. Why didn't the students jump into the water? Americans would have jumped. My mom is saddest about the moment of drowning. They're 15-year-olds. At that age, I believed in God. Who says love that is painful is not love? For the first time, my mom says to me, Korea was wrong. My country did wrong. The mother of a deceased boy dove into the ocean. The officers fetched her out and she appeared on television saying, "My son is in that dark and cold water." A volunteer committed suicide. The prime minister stepped down. The South Korean TV stations ban music, variety shows, and games for 3 weeks. My mom wakes me in the middle of the night. "If you are on a sinking ship," she says, "don't trust anybody. Don't listen to anybody." During a memorial service, a pastor who witnessed the cleaning and shrouding of the bodies said how much the students must have scraped at the walls while trapped in the ferry, that their fingernails have all fallen off. The chapel broke out in tears. Another footage from inside the ship is uploaded on YouTube under the request of parents of the deceased student. The footage is broadcast. The faces are blurred. The voices are changed. They're laughing for a brief second of nervous excitement. "Do you think we'll become famous?" someone says, "like the Titanic?" What I love about this poem is it actually feels like a news article, but it's a poem. And at the end, the first time I read it, it really gave me chills. I remember this accident taking place. So this poem that I wrote after, and to give you a little bit of background just about me, in 2017, I lost my 11-year-old nephew to suicide. And his mother, who was my only sibling, took her life 2 months later. And that's what my entire collection, Night Swim, is about. And this poem is included in that collection. It's called Survivor is Most Startled of All. Sampung Department Store, Seoul, 1995. Building collapsed due to faulty structure and negligence. Pressure to ride the economic high of the 80s. 502 people perished. The worst peacetime disaster in the nation's history. My aunt, the one who French braided my hair every summer, whose temper all the men in our family feared, the one who reminded me of a steel swan, died that day while shopping for perfume and shoes. Her body was never recovered. People cannot survive 16 days without water, and yet someone did. Park Sung-hyung, 19-year-old sales clerk, was rescued after lying deep in the rubble face down. After warning the rescue worker that she'd wiggled out of her clothes, she demanded he look away from her naked body. She asked for her mother, then wanted to know what happened to the others. My cousins and I later scattered throughout America, California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Mi-kyung, whose mother died at Sampung, had lost her father to cancer the year before. She reached out to me from LA in the days after my nephew took his life. What happened? She wanted to know. Sometimes I can still see my aunt standing behind me, unusually tall for a Korean woman, bent over the top of my head, pulling my hair back tight against my scalp. Years later, in rehab, I wore my hair like that every day. I wanted to answer Mi-kyung, but I also wanted to ask her, does she ever wonder how we made it this far? The article goes on to state of the miraculous survivor who went on living unremarkably into the future. Of all those who were astonished by her survival, no one was more amazed than her. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 prompts to choose from, and I'm going to give you a little bit more time. Let's say 15 minutes for this one, maybe a little bit more, 17 minutes. So here are the 2 that you can choose from. The first is In Ferry Accident incorporates statistics and information from news articles to explore a tragedy which feels personal and causes her to think about her homeland and how tragedy can be personal and or political, even when you are not there to experience it. Write a poem after Ferry Accident about a tragic event that feels personal to you, or through which you have had cause to reflect on something personal. Try to incorporate statistics or dates. So that is the first one. The second one is, what does it mean to survive when the world seems to be falling apart? Write a poem about how you survive, find joy or hope in times of darkness. Okay, it is 5:24. So we will come back together at 5:40-ish. Okay, everybody, let's come back together, kind of finish up where you are. And then if you feel compelled, go ahead and drop a line into the chat. Okay. Woe versus Raid, June 2022, claiming it's good. Oh, I missed. Hold on. I'm going to go back to that. Claiming it's for God country, protection of the unborn. They rob the women of their own bodies. I'm having some trouble maneuvering this. Okay. How cruel the bright blue sky, the thin clouds, the lilac blooming on a fence. How inconsiderate my nephew's laughter, his toddler hands open as sunflowers. How hard to shut the blinds and grieve. The universe is not crying or joyless. Anybody else have one? An 8th grade code name Lizzie from Planned Parenthood poses a clear plastic vagina on the teacher's desk, squirts jelly into a rubber cup, folds it like a taco, and wedges it, shoves, slides, tucks, slips, pushes up inside. The world is doing fine. It's me that is falling apart. I feel that. Okay, guys, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen because I have one last poem I'd like to share with you. We're not going to have time to get to the last one, which is on page 2. It's one of mine, but feel free to look at that, in your own time. This poem is by John Murillo, who his collection, his first full-length poetry collection is one of the best that I read last year. And this poem is called A Refusal to Mourn the Deaths. It's actually longer. A refusal to mourn the deaths by gunfire of 3 men in Brooklyn. One of the things, well, I'll read it to you first, and then I'll tell you why I chose this poem, although it will probably be evident. You strike your one good match to watch its bloom and juke, a swan song just before a night wind comes to snuff it. That's the kind of day it's been. You're black and mild, now useless as a prayer pressed between your lips. God damn the wind and everything it brings. You hit the corner store to cop a light and spy the trouble rising in the cashier's eyes. TV reports some whack job shot 2 cops, then popped himself here in the borough just 1 mile away. You've heard this one before, in which there's blood, in which a black man snaps, in which things burn. You buy your matches. Christ is watching from the wall art swathed in fire. For me, one of the most powerful parts of this poem is the last line, because I think that all of us have seen that image that he's talking about. Christ rising from flames, just this look of desperation on his face. And so I feel like he conveys that desperation, throughout the poem, but in particular in that last image, even though the last image has nothing necessarily to do with what the poem is about, it's exactly what the poem is about. And I think that's what makes it such a beautiful and powerful piece. So this last one, we only have 7 minutes for this one, 8 minutes, is in a refusal to mourn the deaths. Murillo captures the horrors of gun violence by police officers in this country against Black men. It's actually talking about the next poem as well as just violence in general, toward self, toward others. Write a poem about a time that you have been witness to violence of some kind. try to write this poem in 14 lines when you get to the point that you're going to draft the whole thing. I think sometimes, for me at least, writing a short poem is extremely challenging, and it forces you to be very careful with the language that you use and make sure that every image is sharp. So we will come back together at 5:52. Okay, hi everybody. Let's come back together. And when you're ready, go ahead and drop a line. I apologize if I miss any of these lines. Sometimes the chat is moving really quickly and I might miss one. So if that happens, I do apologize. But I hope, as we finish up tonight, there's a special announcement from the organizers here at Rhino. So please stay tuned for that after we, read these last lines of your poems. I was so nervous in the beginning that I forgot to thank Rhino for the opportunity to do this workshop with all of you, especially Donna and Virginia, and Pablo, it's so nice to meet you. So I just want to say that sometimes my nerves get the best of me. And I'm a middle school teacher, but teaching adults or like working with adults like this is like nerve-wracking in a different way. So thank you all for doing this with me. And I'm just waiting to see if there are any lines that are going to pop up. Okay, with a smile, he gives flowers. Oh, let me go back. With a smile, he gives her flowers, red and violet blooms, fading slowly, unlike his endless passion. You watch impassive. Are you there or not? Your shadow in the lamplight would like to cut itself out and fly through pixels to offer them cover. At the bottom of the subway escalator, a woman waves a jagged knife as we descend. I'd like to read the rest of that poem. I am not there when he wraps his hands around her throat, gives her a necklace of bruises she'll wear for a week. I watch them sort 3- and 4-year-olds into thises and that's, tender and trouble, wild and wily. I must have held my breath, but I cannot be sure. The moment has slowed. I almost feel like this is a poem. Like, wow, I just got chills a little bit. It's a chat poem. Okay, thank you all. Thank you all so much. I do have to give it, my publishers would kill me if I didn't plug my books, which I haven't yet. So Night Swim is out with Diode Editions. You can purchase it through my website. I have a new chapbook that just came out like a week ago, which is about addiction and recovery, and that is through Milk and Cake Press. So both of those are available as links on my website. Okay, there's my plug. Back to your poems. The moment has slowed. I press the brake to silence. Going with me a cruel halo. Okay, thank you all so much. I think, oh wait, let me see, is there more? Couple more. A reporter watching the cops trying to bend a dead man with care, trying to fit it all into place in a job and life of his own that didn't quite fit. All right. I think that's it. And thank you, Courtney. Thank you all so much. I'm going to turn it over to Rhino, and thank you again for the opportunity to write with you.
Well, thank you so much, Joan. And thank you for giving us this space to think about very important things and find a way to write through it. And please, all of you, do go get Night Swim. It'll be good for you, believe me. And thank you so much for Donna and Andrea and Virginia for making all this happen. Thank you so much, Donna. And please join us for our launch for Rhino 2022 on July 10th. It's going to be at 2 p.m. and it's going to feature some awesome poets, Don Denberg, Chris Companion, Kaiko Wrighty, Karen Llagas, Miriam Goma, Mishka Tolbert, Miguel Gaberto Garcia, Aaron Kai Kato Kimura, and Yuxi Lin. So do please join us. There is a registration on there. And thank you all for sharing. I do think we've written a poem together in this chat. Please do go back to this work and make wonderful work and then send it to Rhino. Thank you guys.
Woohoo! You can unmute for a minute and Joan, and thank you. for
Really
that
good.
Wonderful.
Inspiring work.
Applause to you. Thank you.
Thank you for helping us survive
You helped me.
hard times.
Keep teaching the kids and the grown-ups and writing.
I don't know. The kids are, it's like they don't, it's just, I don't know why it's easy, not easier. It's not easy work, but we just kind of like are goofy together. You know, adults, I feel like I have to be a little bit more serious, but maybe that's my problem. I should just be ridiculous all the time.
Right, that's right. We really appreciate you being here. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Everyone take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.
Well done.
Hi, Donna.
Hi, I'm here.
Yay.
And yeah, I was a little worried about knocking out again, so I left my camera off, but you were amazing. That was such a good workshop.